Welcome, everyone. I'm Patricia Shampton, Director of Alumni Relations for the Texas Exes, and thank you for joining us for the July Lunchtime Lecture, which is entitled, Can Ads Make Us Do Things? Before we begin, we would like to thank our brand new sponsor of these events, the awesome meal kit company, Home Chef. Thank you, Home Chef, for helping us to bring all of us together today to learn something new. Our speaker today is Dr. Ann Kahlor, a professor in the UT Stan Richards School of Advertising and Public Relations in the Moody College of Communication. Dr. Kahlor's primary research interest is in health and environmental risk communication with an emphasis on information seeking and avoiding. She has explored information behaviors in contexts ranging from cancer to nanotechnology to carbon capture and storage. A secondary interest is in cultural and racial norms related to health behaviors and message processing. Prior to academia, she worked in journalism as a freelance writer and as a communication officer for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation National Program Office dedicated to substance abuse treatment. Please welcome Dr. Kahlor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here to present to you a lecture from one of my favorite classes that I teach at UT called Psychology of Advertising. So we're going to, the title of the talk is Can Ads Make Us Think? Which I also say, can ads make us do things? And basically what this topic is about is a quick introduction to psychology related to advertising. When I teach this in a long form semester class, I tell students that it's essentially like learning Psychology 101, which is, I think, often people's favorite class from college, but specifically in the context of advertising, right? So we learn lots of psychology concepts, theories, and research, but we apply it specifically to advertising. And so that's kind of going to be the gist of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So the first thing that I have an opening slide here, and I'm calling it today's lunchtime menu, since many of you are probably eating lunch right now as I speak. I'm going to talk about, and you might be familiar with these concepts, but I'm going to refresh them if you are, about demographics and psychographics. Then I'm going to show you an ad from Toyota Tacoma that gives us a really good example of some of the ways in which advertisers are directing their ads to an attempt to connect with and appeal to specific demographics and psychographics. Then we're going to just think a little bit about how people think about ads, and we're going to learn about schemas, which is a really good way to think about how memory serves us and how that relates to our processing of ads. I'm going to give you one other ad example, which is the HP Sprocket. It's a little tiny printer that people can connect to their phones. We're going to look at that ad, and we're going to think aloud about who do we think they're trying to target with that ad. And then I'm going to offer you some closing thoughts. So let's launch right in. The first thing I want to ask is, can ads make us do things? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is no. So this concludes our talk. Thank you. Just kidding. Good ads can't make us do anything, but they can make us think. Okay, so if we think about an ad, we remember it, or at least pieces of it. So what makes us think about the ads that we're presented with all the time? What makes us hone in on one and think about it? And really getting us to think about an ad requires that advertisers connect with us in a compelling way at the individual level. But this requires targeting specific consumer groups, okay? And this takes us to those two terms I said that I was going to introduce us to, which was psychographics and demographics. But before I say that, I just want to reinforce that ads are always developed with to target specific consumers, because a catch-all generic ad, first of all, those don't exist. But second of all, if we tried to reach one generic audience, it would fail because there is no single everyone, right? There are subgroups of individuals that we can connect with in these targeted groups. So one way that we connect with people is via their demographics, right? And so demographics are essentially observable characteristics of a target audience, okay? And so that could be age, that could be gender and sexuality, that could be family structure, that could be social class or income or education or all of those things together. It could be race, ethnicity, it could be geography. It could be the specific sort of area in which people live. Many different ways that we can define demographics, but these are some of the key ones and ones that advertisers often keep in mind when they're creating messages for audience. So in terms of demographics, as I mentioned, we group consumers that share identities according to these demographics that we find through research to be characteristic of whoever it is that uses our product or subscribes to our service or donates to our political action fund, or whatever it is. And so we start to identify who are the people that we appeal to and how can we appeal to them even, with more direction and more authenticity and so on. So it is important to note that although I listed those demographics, we often aren't just targeting one, like, a certain age group. We're targeting multiple intersecting demographics. And so, for example, an ad might target middle income Texan Hispanic males 30 to 45. And so that's how specific we need to get, because these identities matter, and these intersecting identities can help us figure out the most specific way that we can reach people with a message that is relevant, that feels authentic, and that makes them feel like we are talking specifically to them. So the even thinking about Latinos or Hispanic males, you wouldn't be able to connect with all of them as though they are a monolith with one ad, right? We would have to think about all these other factors like income, education, age, and even cultural identity. So there might be Mexican American identity, there might be South American, which then would be sliced into even further, slices of identity. And so it actually can get pretty targeted to who it is that we're trying to reach. Another way that we try to connect with audiences is through something called psychographics. And psychographics include things like personality, activities we do in our spare time, interests that we might have, values that we might have, attitudes, and cultural connectivity, and then our sense of self and our sense of belonging. Usually we think about that in terms of belonging to groups, right? And so these things can be additional factors that we will learn about through research to really figure out who is the audience we need to reach and what can we know about them before we try to craft a message that's going to resonate with them in important ways. And so I want to give you an example, and let me just give a little background to this. Adweek, this is an article from Adweek where I pulled these photos from, but it's basically they are showcasing an ad program that was developed by Toyota. And just as a little background, Toyota's had a collaboration for more than 13 years with a Latin digital media company called Remezcla. And so Toyota has been really good for the last couple of decades, even connecting with Hispanic consumers. And I'm going to show you an ad in a second, but before I do, let me just sort of tell you a little bit about that. The first thing is that this is specifically for Toyota Tacoma. And what they're trying to do is make an authentic connection with Latinos. One of the things that you absolutely cannot do is attempt to connect with an audience in a way that they're going to see through right away and be like suspicious of or shut down and sort of shut it off or walk away from it because they feel as though you're speaking down to them, you don't really understand them, and you're not really trying to make any kind of authentic connection from a place of understanding, empathy, and so on. And so good ads trying to reach cultural identities, racial or ethnic identities, do their research first to make sure that, and often will call on agencies that have a lot of background working with different ethnic groups to really connect with them meaningfully. And so this is what Toyota was trying to do. And some of the themes or sub-themes that they're going to bring up in the ad that you're going to see are going to include family, cultural references, masculinity is going to be an important part of this because a lot of truck purchases are made by men. They're also going to focus on craftsmanship and then connecting with nature. And I'm going to give a little bit more background on those things But first, I guess I did design this, so I wanted to mention some sort of snippets of what drives or drove Toyota to create this ad. So first of all, Toyota is #1 with the Hispanic market and has been for nearly 20 years. Hispanic sales were 24% of all 2022 US sales, up from 12% in 2010, right? So that's just in 12 years, they've seen a doubling of sales for Toyota among Hispanic buyers. The research suggests that, and this would be in-depth research that would be done through focus groups, interviews, on the ground meetups and that sort of thing. Hispanic males want to be seen as responsible and hardworking, while also taking time to escape their daily routine and get out there. And so in the ad that you're going to see, you're really going to see Toyota trying to connect with all of these ideas in the ad that they create. The vice president of Toyota marketing told Automotive News in 2023, quote, "The purchasing power that they represent is near $2 trillion. The fact that the Hispanic demographic skews younger brings some exciting opportunities and different ways to engage and connect." Okay, so with all of that background, I'm going to show the ad for you and we'll get a sense of how all this came together.
Today we're going out with my friend Xavier. We're going to go out on a hike into some California woods. We're going to take the workshop and we're going to start crafting a one-of-a-kind guitar.
My name is Tomás Alfredo Delgado. I am a luthier. I build custom guitars and I restore instruments.
My name is Tomás Candelario Delgado, and I'm a luthier in training right now. I'm an apprentice.
So my grandfather Porfirio and my great uncle Candelario started the business in 1928 in Mexico. They came to Los Angeles and opened here in 1947. My dad took over in 67, and then I came here in 1989. I literally picked up and I ran. I recently just decided that I need time to myself and to not just always feel spent or burned out. Getting out and having a balance in life. Listo.
Let's do it. Yeah, Bob, you're gonna love Zavi. He's cool. He knows a lot about hiking, a lot about the outdoors.
We're looking forward to it, to meeting him and getting out of the shop.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Right?
What's up?
Hey, good to see you guys. Welcome, man.
What's going on?
I have a perfect spot for you.
Yeah.
So, hey, vámonos. Let's go. You always want to stay on the trail. In most places where you go hiking, they have like a dedicated trail.
Yeah.
And just to preserve the nature, like the beauty of like whatever's around.
Got it.
So like when you see this, like how do you see a guitar?
At this point, no, you're looking at the species of the tree.
Uh-huh.
When it gets less sun, it grows stiffer. So if it's stiffer, you can thin the piece out more.
More,
No
yeah.
aguanta la tensión de la guitarra.
Oh. You know, there's a lot of added benefits to being outside. Helps lower, heart disease. It's good for the mental health. Probably boosts creativity también, looking at all this like, beautiful stuff out here.
Good.
Yeah. All good.
We take it to the workshop from here and finish what we started, right?
It's gonna look great. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
I'm constantly staring at guitars, finished products, or just pieces of wood. When we go out and connect to nature, it just gives you a level of creativity more because you're like, wow, I'm taking something that's growing here and turning it into something that's going to be completely repurposed, but it gives you a different level of respect for the wood. But my dad's been showing me that the levels of success in life are being around people you love, doing something you love, and then providing stuff for the people that you love.
To see my son Tomas carry on our family legacy, it's a part of my life that I never planned. I couldn't plan. I get to watch my son work on his creative side. And the biggest part is the fact he chose to be here and to want to learn what I learned from my dad on the crown floor. Buddy, I think this is done, mira.
All done.
Mírala. No, que no.
Look at that.
A ver.
Beautiful. Wow.
And there we are.
Today we're going out with my
You wanna
friend
play that
Javier.
again?
We're gonna
So I love that ad. I get chills every time I see it. I want to ask you to pop into the chat for a second and let me know, as you were watching this, what were some of the themes or points of connection or things that might resonate with those who were viewing this ad with you as you watched this ad. Try to think of one or two words that sort of describe a point of connection with people. Family for sure, right? Storytelling, community, family legacy. Family was so strong. And that history, right? Being true to that family history, carrying on. It would be online. So these would not, someone was asking, it was a good question. Someone was asking about length. And a lot of ads that happen now are happening on social media. And people actually do. If you can connect and tell a story and they can see that story right away, they will watch it. Social media is great for these kinds of things, YouTube and that sort of thing. It's not the kind of ad that you would see on TV, right? It's the kind of ad that would be on social media, on digital media, and people do watch them. Health, yes. I really liked the shout out that they had there for heart disease, which is really a problem in Hispanic communities. Connecting with nature. That was a really important part of this ad, and the ability, none of you have really mentioned much about the truck, but it was the ability for that truck, right, to connect this individual to the work that they do, to their family, to nature, right? And the role that the truck was almost like a side character from the family, but the truck was there to take everybody to the most important moments in their daily life. And so just a really, really important story. A lot of ads aren't just the kinds of ads that you might see flipping through a magazine, or that you might see on a billboard, or that you might see for, 10 seconds or 15 seconds on TV or here on the radio. A lot of advertising is happening now in digital media, and there is a lot of call for excellent storytelling, and they have the time and the space to tell those complete stories. Now, one of the things that they'll often have in the case of a story like this is they'll have different versions of it. And what I show you is the full version. But there would also be versions that they would use for shorter ads on digital media that might be a 15-second one of it, right? So they'd splice different scenes together to get basically the point across, but in a much shorter time span. And so what you're seeing is the full this is the full Picasso, but there's going to be little snapshots of it that are going to be different assets that will appear across social media. Okay, awesome feedback. Thank you. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, now that we sort of have this top of mind, the demographics, the psychographics, the connecting with groups of individuals based on their identity and intersecting identities, I want us to think about how we think about ads, right? So as we're watching that ad, what's really happening cognitively? What's happening in our brains as we process that ad? And the first sort of concept I want to bring up is that our initial perceptions, right? So the connection that we make with that ad right in the very beginning, that's the gateway to further processing. And so marketers try to appeal to our senses, really, to break past perception, because a lot of things we process them in a split second, right? We are exposed to it, and at that point we sort of determine, sometimes cognitively, but cognizantly, but sometimes not, whether we're going to continue to engage with that message. And so we think about the sensory gateway, which is the very first stop for information that's coming in when we're exposed to a message. And it really is sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. In the case of the ad that we just saw, right, it's sight and hearing were the sensory perception gateways that we were processing that message through. Sensory perception basically is just referring to how sensory receptors notice that stimuli first, right? It's the shortest type of memory that we have. It's less than a second, and it is that sort of microprocessing when we first come in to contact with a message. Then the brain is going to focus in on if at that point of sensation perception, if we are compelled or motivated to connect with that message further, our brain is going to start to focus in on elements of the stimuli and start to search for meaning, right? And so part of that process is going to involve then organizing what we're seeing, right? Making sense of it. And we're going to organize what we see into meaningful patterns that are based on our memory of similar concepts, right? And so a lot of you mentioned in the chat things like caring and family and connectedness and history. We can relate to that, right, from our own lives. And so as we're watching that memory, we're having fleeting moments in our sort of processing that's connecting with our family, that's connecting with us being in nature, that's connecting with us driving, right? And that's really how we process information. It's sort of in a very narcissistic way. Most of the connections that we make are going to be to us and our history. And so as we're, so we focused in, we're spending a little bit more time with it, we're spending more cognitive resources with it, we're starting to organize the message. Now, we're not cognizant that we're doing this, right? The brain works very quickly, but we start to then interpret the meaning of the stimuli, right? Like we start to make meaning of it, and storytelling, like some people mentioned in the chat that it was a really good story that we just watched. Storytelling is a quick way to connect with people in expected and easily understood ways when you're trying to convey a message to them. And so there's a couple points I want to make before I show you a diagram that helps sort of drive this home even further. First of all, we are often in a state of sensory overload, right? We're just inundated with information, not just through advertising, but through conversations, through just the sounds of nature around us, right? The sounds of life, the sound our car makes, the sound right now as I'm talking to you, I can hear the motor in my computer. I can hear people downstairs in my house, just there's always stimuli to take in. And we have to become very good at tuning the ones out that are irrelevant to us and focusing in on the ones that have some meaning for us. And so that's also something that advertisers are working with an understanding of. And then multitasking, which we multitask more now than perhaps any time in history. And that further taxes our ability to focus in and process messages. And so advertisers also need to recognize that as well. This means that ads need to connect with people very quickly, right? Like less than a second, people need to see something and feel some compulsion or motivation to continue focusing on that particular stimuli. So if we were to sort of draw this out, like, what does it mean to move from from the sensory stimuli into actually interpreting a message? The process that we're moving through is that the stimuli that we're taking in the ad we just saw, it was really just audio and visual, our sensory receptors, it hits our sensory receptors. Again, this is less than a second, the process that this is taken. And then it feeds into this sort of initial exposure. So once our sensory receptors have connected with something, we've been exposed, right? And at each step in this diagram that I'm showing you, if we move forward, right, we can quit at any time. We can turn away, our attention can be grabbed by something else, then we drop off, right? So we might drop off at exposure, we might drop off at attention. Attention is what happens after exposure, where we're allocating more cognitive resources to that stimuli, and then we begin to think about it. And as we begin to think about it, we're actually starting to select different highlights from the message, because there's a lot of information there. We're really not taking it all in at once. We're picking up on little pieces of it and organizing it and beginning to interpret it. And that's what your brain was doing, as it was thinking, that's family. Oh, that's history. That's love. That's craftsmanship. That's, like you were starting to interpret things in recognizable chunks of information. And so really from initial exposure, which is right around here, to the stimuli, we might, as I just said, allocate those attentional resources, select and organize, and then make meaning of it or interpret it. So I guess I'm just basically re-explaining that. But as I said, I want to reinforce this. We can stop processing at any stage based on whether our motivation is strong or low, and whether there's something of interest to us in that ad. The other thing I wanted to say is that during interpretation, right? So that's the end over here. During interpretation, we're interpreting the stimuli, as I mentioned before, based on memories that we have, right? Pre-existing information that we have, or pre-existing stored information that we have that helps us process a message. And we have, there are lots of terms within the cognitive psychology field used to describe what that information looks like stored in memory, conceptually what it looks like. And schemas is one of the terms that's often used in cognitive psychology. And I like it because I think it's just a term that I was able to latch onto. And so, so I'm going to use that term to sort of explain the way in which information is organized for us in memory. Again, schemas are pre-existing structured knowledge that is stored in our memory. I'll explain it further. So a schema is a memory structure that psychologists like to think of as sort of networked like webs, right? So neurons, synapses, and so on, networked like webs that can organize and simplify incoming information. So if you think about the schema that we might have, and this is just hypothetical, it's just a rendering that somebody sketched out for what somebody's schema for an egg might look like, right? It's totally hypothetical. But let's say, my schema for an egg, we got egg in the center, and then we've got all of this interconnected information or concepts distributed throughout my memory that come together in a networked way because I have seen an egg before. And over time, I have learned since I was an infant that eggs are associated with birds, and birds are associated with feathers, and feathers, help create wings. And here's the class, here's, and so all of this information is stored in my memory. And the more complicated or advanced my memory is for something, right? The more detailed my memory is for something, the larger that schema is going to be, right? And if I learn a concept or am introduced to something that is like an egg, then it will be networked into and sort of overlapping with my memory for egg. So this is one of the ways in which cognitive psychologists tend to think about the way in which we have information stored in memory. And so as advertisers, we often need to think about, if I'm trying to connect with somebody based on their identity, one of the things I need to connect with is their memories, right? And so what do we think those memories look like? And so that connection process, let me give you an example here. If I see this, right, there's a lot going on here. It is essentially, by the way, if you look at it carefully, a chair, but it's also an octopus, a sculpture, a figure. It's black, it's amorphous, it's many things. But while I'm trying to make sense of this new information, of this new visual stimuli, I can hopefully channel into my schema memory for a chair. Like, here are all the ways that a chair can look, and I see there's similarities like right here, and these legs, my brain is able to be like, whoa, that's a chair, right? And so this is the way that schemas kind of help us make sense of a new stimuli, something we've never seen before. We have lots of schemas stored in memory. We have schemas for what people should look like, right? We have schemas for social scripts of how we interact with people. We have schemas for ourselves, how I understand myself. My self-concept is part of my self-schema. And we even have schemas for events. And so, how you act at certain events. So we have schemas for everything. These are just a type, if we were to do subtypes of different schemas that people might have, this is what they might look like. And so going on with that concept, again, reminding you, schemas are rooted in our memories and our experiences. But what does that mean? Well, it means that our interpretation of information is not always going to be objective, because we are grounded in, our interpretation is always grounded in our own understanding of things, our experiences, the way we were taught things, our cultural experiences, all of these things sort of, I don't want to say taint, because it's not necessarily bad, but it basically colors our interpretation. And so, one of the things that this is one lecture of many that I deliver in my psychology of advertising class. And when we start to talk in that class about things like stereotypes and ways in which our schemas are a disservice to us, the way that we override less than objective interpretations is to really pause and think about those schemas and really make concerted efforts to build out those schemas in ways that make them more fair, less stereotypical, and so on. But basically, our default is to assimilate new information with the most accessible and existing schemas that we have, right? And so one of the things that advertisers are trying to do when they're trying to connect with you, motivate you to think about their message, motivate you to attach it to any schemas that you have. We also hope that through connecting with people through advertising, we're making a particular schema, we're adding information to that schema, and because it's been activated, it's also more accessible and more, top of mind for people. And so advertisers, another thing I want to acknowledge is that advertisers use research to do all of this, right? Nobody is saying like, I have a hunch that Latinos really care about family. All right, that one might have a hunch about that, and one would be correct. However, it's based on research. They're doing interviews, they're doing focus groups, they're getting out and talking to people, and they have hard evidence that these are the factors that are going to matter to this particular audience that you're trying to reach. So it's always based on research. They use research to identify their best target audience, and that might be who has purchased the product in the past, who might need or want the product in the future. In the example of Latinos, it was that they are spending more money than they've ever spent before with car purchases. And so, so there's lots of compelling reasons why you might decide, oh, I really need to connect with this particular audience, and then start thinking about how can I do that? How can I do that in an authentic way? And so then you study the demographics and psychographics of that target that you need to reach. And so all of this is going on behind the scenes before the ad can even really be conceived of. And so one of the things that can be kind of fun going forward is to, when you watch ads, really think about who are they trying to connect with? Does this connect with me in any way? And does it connect with me in a very sort of primary way, or am I more of a secondary audience, right? Like I am not Latino, I'm not a Hispanic male, I'm also not on the market for a truck, nor do I make guitars, but that ad connected with me. And perhaps it connected with me because I love music, I love nature, and I have 5 kids. And so family is really big for me. And so, you can have primary audiences and then secondary audiences, and so on. So while they're gonna really target one specific audience, they're also gonna try to create a message that isn't gonna be off-putting to other audiences and might also connect with other audiences as well. One of the ways to think about how to connect with a target is to identify some of the common schemas, right? The memories that they're going to have, that they're going to bring to that message, and there will be similarities. Of course, we are all individuals, but we also share a lot of attributes. We share a lot of cultural touchstones. We share all kinds of demographics and psychographics with others. And so, we can't possibly connect with every individual out there, so we have to group people. And so sort of bringing it back to that schemas and learning about people's memories, common memories that people have, common scripts that people have, can really help us to connect as well, and then create ads that are going to resonate with those schemas. And so, again, can ads make us do things? The answer is no, but ads can make us think about things, and do often, all day long, every day. Ads can connect with our existing schemas, right? ads can make it so that when we have to make a decision about a service or a product or a donation or whatever, the brand we thought about most deeply and most recently is the one that's going to be top of mind. And so Toyota is hoping that if they have connected with Hispanic males who are potentially on the market for a truck, right? There's a lot of trucks out there. If they are the ones who have connected with this audience, they are the brand that audience is going to remember when it's time for them to buy a truck, or when they're talking about trucks with other people and they're saying, you know, I really like Toyota Tacoma. And so, you know, so it's not just the moment that you're trying to connect with, you're trying to be stored in memory so that you're top of mind when future decision making happens. So I'm going to show you another ad. And for this ad, sorry, I want to go back. For this ad, I want you to think about who are they trying to reach? Okay, who are they trying to connect with? How do I know? And that kind of thing. And we're going to pop that into the chat just like we did with the Toyota Tacoma ad.
In the chilly minutes of uncertainty, I wanna be in the warmth of your love, mine. With you, take your hand along the sea. That means we'll try and catch the wind. You look amazing. All right. Red sundown bears the sky. Wanna hide away behind your smile. Everywhere I look, your eyes I find. Have a good day, hon. Go meet it, you know, be the sweetest thing, make me sing. Diamonds will try and catch you. Guys. Yeah. We're standing. Hey, kiddo. It's where I wanna be and long to be. Diamonds will try and catch the wind. Diamonds will try and catch the wind.
I'm not crying, you're crying, right? I cry every time, or I get teary every time I see that ad, and I watch that ad every semester, and every time it gets me. So who are they trying to reach? Okay, middle class, big family, tech savvy. Who else are we getting? Parents. Parents. Suburban America, totally. Like, you know, the yard, the house, 2 stories. Like, what's the lived experience that they're capturing with this? And what might make this connect with people who aren't parents? Passage of time, right? Nostalgia, 100% nostalgia. Yes, and also the experience of growing and feeling disconnected from people with which we were once very connected, right? And then here's a product that can help you capture those fleeting moments so you can one day look back on them and they're not really gone, right? And so just this ad did a really good job, I think, connecting with people, with their memories, with childhood, with parenting. Everybody was somebody's child, right? Everybody experienced that. I have a sixth grader right now, and she's trying to stay connected to me, but she's also just pushing me away in little ways, just like, when the dad comes into the bathroom and the daughter's in there combing her hair and she's just like, oh my God, you just why are you even here? Like it's such a universal lived experience, and good ads connect with universal lived experiences so that a broad range of people can connect with that in that moment. But then beyond that, so that's like sort of almost the secondary thing. Beyond that was this parent-child relationship, right? And the passage of time, and that you have technology for that. And look, it's a very small device, and look how easily you can capture that moment. So just it's a fun ad too. I show that on the first day of my psychology of advertising class, and there's a lot of teary eyes, because these are a lot of freshmen, sophomores in my class, and it wasn't that long ago, right, that they lived this. And some of them, it's their first semester at UT away from home, and they can 100% connect with this and really relate to it, feel that empathy, feel that emotional connection, and so on. And then sometimes I'll ask them, do you know anybody that has this printer? And not many people do know somebody that has it. And one person was like, yeah, my brother has it. It doesn't really work well. So it's kind of a buzzkill once we start talking about it, but the ad itself does its job. All right, so that was fun. We got at least thinking about who the target market is, who they're trying to reach, what are the demographics, what are the psychographics, and then, so, my hope going forward is that any ad that you see from now on, you're really going to be thinking carefully, because it's kind of fun, who are they trying to reach? It's also a part of like media literacy, right? Advertising literacy, to even stop and think, this is strategic messaging. They are trying to reach somebody and urge them to do, think about, act, it's specific. They're specifically trying to activate people. And so what is it that they're trying to do? And it's a good thing to teach your kids. It's a good thing to think about yourself. And it's just interesting and fun to think about these stories and what are the motivations behind wanting to tell that story. Also think about schemas, right? So we had schemas for family and family relationships. We had schemas for like school and the daughter, like the first day of school schema, kind of, there were lots of different schemas that they were touching on and hoping that they would connect with people via their own schemas for what that looks like, what it looks like to send your kids off to school on the first day of school and so on for a specific demographic, right? I'm at about the time that I was gonna spend with you talking. And so I just want to sort of leave us with some thoughts before I pick up the Q&A. One is that, as I've said before a couple times, ads can't make us act, but they can make us think. I also wanted to mention that ads grab our attention with content that connects with us, right? That's a really important goal, that connection is going to happen via demographics and psychographics, that connections can urge us to process an ad more deeply and really spend some time thinking about it, which is going to anchor it more in our long-term memory, in our existing schemas, and that schemas help ads stick with us in memory, which makes it more likely to be top of mind when we're called upon to make a decision about that particular product or service or whatever. And so that concludes the part of my lecture where I talk at you. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A.
Okay, so we have one question in the chat. If you can look at that, Dr. Kahlor.
Sure. Is it the almost all the advertising one?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So it says almost all the advertising I consume is online, either in social media or streaming video. And I find the vast majority of these ads a real turnoff. They're for products and services I'm very unlikely to buy. Yep. Pushing brands that don't connect with me. Right. And so and so you got to wonder like what the misfire is, right? And I also have a similar experience, and it has to do with me being a mother, and sometimes ads will try to connect with me, because social media, there's a lot of data there that they're looking at based on things you've clicked on, things you talk about, and so on. And I do talk about parenting all the time, but it's not the only thing that I am. And I don't really like to be targeted about that, because I'm also kind of non-traditional in a lot of ways. And so I find a lot of those ads to be a turnoff. And another thing that online or digital advertising does is it's using all that data from things you click on. And I don't always click on things that characterize who or what I am or what I'm interested in. So then I'll start getting ads on XYZ, which it was an accident that I even looked at that. Or, I ask Alexa about something. Her light just turned blue. Like, what do you need? And Alexa's collected that data, right, from me bringing up a topic. And then all of a sudden my Facebook feed's got all these ads for Botox or something like that, like it's just, and it doesn't feel right when an ad is addressing you off sort of brand for who you are. And that's just really one of the risks of all of this. You've heard terms like big data, and you've heard how we are just swimming in data, and all of that data can benefit your ability to target people, but it can also sort of convolute the way in which you understand that potential target market.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One is a comment, one is they're both comments. So
Okay.
One in the chat is Instagram ads are pretty good at targeting my likes. And then another question that's in the QA is the ads on some daytime cable TV shows are focused on elderly or geriatric individuals.
Right.
A lot of the time, the ad is shown over and over and over, and it drives her nuts.
Right.
It's pretty clear who they're targeting. So I love the juxtaposition between one person saying that Instagram, social media, is getting really good at showing her what they think that she may be interested in, but daytime cable TV is not really doing the same job.
They don't have the nuance, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the nuance to reach individuals with daytime cable. Another thing that if in the semester of my class, one of the things that I would focus on one day is that there's a sweet spot with repetition. So we need repetition to retain something in memory. We need to be exposed to it a few times, and then it's going to stick with us. But there is a point where that repetition actually decreases in effectiveness, and we actually start to hate the message or the brand or whatever. And so, advertisers are trying to reach that sweet spot, which for some people, they're going to be more sensitive, especially if the message doesn't connect with them anyway, right? And so, honestly, television advertising or, cable advertising is a lot more clunky to work with than digital advertising, which is really good at targeting specific groups of people.
Yeah.
That first question was, if budgets are tight for focus group testing, what are some other forms of research? There's observational research. There is, there's data that can be collected, right? And so every time that you go into your social media, data is being collected about you, and that data can be purchased. That data can be accessed through. So if you're doing Facebook ads, for example, you have access to the analytics that they offer in there, and you can actually check boxes like, I want to reach people who are this, and this, right? And then it's actually pretty cost effective and pretty effective in reaching people. And those are considered kind of lower cost. Now there's people you're not going to reach, people that aren't online, right? People who aren't on Facebook, for example. But yeah, that's one of the ways that they do it.
And then in the QA, there's another one about Gillette, how they did a series of commercials featuring
Right.
toxic maxillin. What do you think about that?
So this is interesting because there's also been some other ones. There was the recent Bud Light one that actually sort of like rolled off into the atmosphere in ways that no one predicted in a way. But this one that you're talking about, the best a man can get, that was the ad campaign. And Gillette Razors was trying to reach a younger demographic there. And if you have young people in your lives, you will know that for the most part, they're pretty progressive. They call us out on things all the time. Professors have a reputation for being, brainwashing progressives, but it's actually the UT students that are the brainwashing progressives. They're constantly pushing me in new ways and in wonderful ways. For me, I like growth. I like thinking about things. And so those Gillette ads landed just where they needed to land in terms of, let's call them emerging facial hair, shavers, right? So young people, and that's who they were, because Gillette is an old brand. And they're not going to have much brand equity with these younger entry-level shavers. And so they connected with exactly who they needed to connect with. Now, what happens is you might have a primary audience that you can connect with very well, but then that secondary audience, which was people who are particularly sensitive to advertising or messages that make them feel like their masculinity is under attack, for example, that sort of spun off into its own interpretation. It became a news story unto itself, but the bottom line of Gillette wasn't in the long term impacted by that. But advertisers need to be prepared for any backlash that might happen with the primary or secondary audience, or even a tertiary audience, and whether that's going to take on a life of its own. There was a misfire with Budweiser when they partnered with a transgender influencer, because it felt like Budweiser really forgot who drinks Budweiser, like whoever they were trying to reach was perhaps entry-level drinkers who are younger individuals for whom they're completely comfortable thinking about gender and sexuality. But there's a whole lot of Americans who aren't at all comfortable with those concepts, and certainly don't want to be thinking about them while they're drinking their beer, their budget beer. And so there's lots of ways that these can be progressive for one audience, but really off-putting for another audience. And so, advertisers need to be aware of all of that, and then accept blame when something doesn't perform as intended.
What do you think about the progressive ads in which the older fellow is instructing others how not to become their parents? Do you think that one's successful?
I think they're hilarious.
Yeah.
Because we all become our parents. And so it's that script, that schema that we have for aging and so on. So I think it resonates with exactly who it needs to resonate with.
Yeah. And in the chat, there's also a question, and you may be able to answer this. It says basically, I also hate ads that play over and over again. She points out Pandora. Since the music is mine, why does this happen?
I know, it's the worst. Pandora's really bad about it. But there's a lot of complicating factors, and ones that I'm not an expert in. We do have faculty experts who know a lot about media and media buying. So the advertiser's paying for that placement in Pandora, and they might pay for placement between X and X time, and then however many mentions they can get, or however many times that ad's going to play during X and X time, and they've got a premium spot and they've paid for that. And if there aren't a ton of ads to play in that time, it's just going to be the same ones playing again and again. But a couple things do happen. It's not all bad, right? Just because you find it annoying doesn't mean you're not going to remember it. And so, some messages are going to need to connect with us in terms of our schemas and so on for long-term memory. But the ads that are playing on Pandora, they're not necessarily looking to connect with you in the long term. They're just trying to connect with you and be top of mind the next time you make a decision about a product. And so there's a lot going on when that repetition happens. Some repetition is good. A lot of repetition can be bad, but not for all people, not all the time, and not for all products.
Okay. 2 more questions in the chat, and that's probably will be all that we have time for. But One is kind of a comment, back to the idea of social media doing a great job targeting and understanding what is interesting, but cable TV not so much. There is a comment here that says there's a huge difference between the ads my daughter sees on TV
Oh
and
my
the
God.
ones that I see.
Mhm.
So what do you think about that?
Well, it's just because they know who watches what shows, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
even
true.
though I said before TV is clunky, there's a
Yeah.
lot of data on every single show that's given to advertisers to be like, do you want to reach young adults or do you want to reach 50-year-olds? You know, so who do you want to reach? What gender, what income, and so on. And so, yeah, the shows that she watches are probably different than the shows that you watch. And so they're going to have a different audience and there's going to be different ads shown to them.
Okay, last question. How have the notorious ads for the Super Bowl changed the way people perceive ads and how advertisers go about developing their ideas? It's a great
Right.
question.
Yeah, Super Bowl ads are so expensive. It's like the Academy Awards of ads, or like, you know, those are the big name brands. They can take risks somewhat, although they're not going to be super risky because they're spending so much money. But they have they're often longer ads. The production quality is really high. Honestly, I don't spend a lot of time teaching about Super Bowl ads because they're just one sort of blip in the overall scheme of what we're exposed to. But they do take on a life of their own and people talk about them. And the day afterwards, the news media are flooded with stories about what ad people loved and what ad they didn't like and so on. So it's almost a whole different ball game. But yeah, it's like they're like little short films and they have in some ways elevated discussions of and awareness of advertising, the bigger and bigger they've become.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kahlor, for joining us today. We
Thank
appreciate
you
you
for
taking the
having
time to
me.
speak with us.
Pleasure.
The alumni love this program, and so it was really a pleasure talking with you. And thanks to everybody that tuned in as well. We appreciate you coming and listening to Dr. Kahlor, and we hope that you can join us again next month for our August virtual lecture that is entitled Folk Art Matters, the Place of Folk Art in Times of Joy and Times of Trouble, with Dr. Suzanne Serra from the College of Liberal Arts. You can register for that today at texasaccess.org/lunchtime lectures. And again, thank you to everyone for being here, and y'all have a really good week. Okay, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.